I agree with you in that this war doesn't make any sense. It's not rational. And everyone knows that America was going to lose this war. The problem is that when empires are in decline, this is just the way they behave. And there's just the historical record, it's pretty overwhelming in that when empires decline, they lash out against the world. They start these stupid wars they can't possibly win. They overextend themselves, and the collapse is terrible for the world. And America very much is an empire in decline. Look at things such as the collapse of the family. Look at things such as the collapse of the currency. Currency debasement in America is just a tremendous problem. The US dollar is no longer worth as much as it was like 10 years ago. The political polarization in America. Congress just cannot function properly. The president has so much power nowadays because Congress has basically decided to just not do anything to avoid any political responsibility. And so it's destroying the checks and balance systems of the US Constitution. Um, the economic depression in America is great. Young people feel as though there's absolutely no hope in the world. They're refusing to have families. They're refusing to invest in the future. They gamble all the time. And so America is really the end of empire at this point. And so what they do is they go and start wars in order to distract people's attentions, in order to prove to the world that they still have it. They're still the bully in the playground, and they can still beat up every other kid, even though they're old and they're weak and they're handicapped. Um, and so, we talk about Iran, but like, look at what was happening before Iran, right? Trump uh, kidnapped the president of Venezuela, which went against international law. Trump deployed his navy in the Caribbean and started to bomb drug boats, which is again against international law. Trump was threatening to annex Greenland. He was threatening to invade Canada. He was threatening to attack Mexico. Right now, he's embargoing Cuba, and people don't even recognize this is happening because there's so much going on in the world. But Cuba was dependent on Venezuela oil. That was its energy supply. And now that Venezuela uh, has fallen to the Americans have embargoed Cuba, and so now people don't have access to electricity. And there are actually people who are starving in Cuba. So this is an empire in decline. It just lashes out against the world. It attacks everyone. And Iran is just the most current iteration of this anger and this hubris. But this hubris made the Americans underestimate the capacity of Iran. They went in thinking that once they decapitate the regime, then the government would fall. And what the Americans didn't recognize was the resilience and the resolve of the Iranian people.
Well, about this imperial decline, it reminds me of something that Emmanuel Todd, the French scholar, argued because, well, again, he predicted the collapse of the Soviet Union already in the 70s by looking at these different social variables. But he also predicted the US empire was heading towards, well, a similar fate already in the early 2000s. And he described essentially what you did, this strange, he called it micro-militarism, this yeah, brutal use of military force in an effort to show power when it's obviously draining. So it, it is an interesting development. But you mentioned that the Americans are losing as if it's a given. How do you why do you assess this? Is this mainly the focus on the military hardware at their disposal, or is it the lack of a clear objective? Or I guess regime change
Right.
will be very hard without the ground troops.
Right. So America right now has several disadvantages. The first major disadvantage is the lack of political will, and that just means the lack of a strategy, the lack of a purpose. It cannot unify the American people in order to make the sacrifice necessary to win this war. In fact, most Americans are against this war. Right before the war started, 70 to 80% Americans voiced their disapproval of a possible war with Iran. Usually when a war starts, people will rally behind the flag, but not in this case. Most Americans are still against the war. So the first issue is the lack of political will. But if you look at the Iranians, they believe that this is a struggle of life and death. So they've set aside the political differences and they've committed to winning this war. Okay, so that's the first factor, political will. The second factor is just manufacturing capacity. So these past 30, 40 years, America went from a manufacturing-based economy to a financial-based economy, and they export their manufacturing capacity to China. Now, when you fight a war, what really matters is your capacity to produce ammunition, to replenish your munitions, logistics. And America doesn't have the manufacturing capacity to fight a long war. In fact, what's happening already is that America is cannibalizing munitions from other parts of the world. They are now transferring munitions from South Korea over to the Middle East, which is stupid to do because now you've basically opened more flanks, opened more vulnerabilities throughout the world. So manufacturing capacity is a very important factor. On the other hand, Iran uses drones and ballistic missiles. And we know that Iran is able to manufacture about 500 drones a day. And quite honestly, you only need to like have 10 drones hit their targets in the Middle East every single day in order for the GCC to cry uncle, right? So manufacturing capacity is a very important factor as well.